The auction yard buzzed with static and grease smoke, crammed between wrecked freighters and neon-lit cranes on the edge of Wreck Yard Moon 9, a salvage colony built from the bones of lost wars. Old mechs rusted where they fell. Traders barked prices for scrap drones and broken navigation cores. A three-headed vendor wrestled with a malfunctioning hover crate. And then, beneath a flickering billboard that read, "Genetic Assets, Final Liquidation," they brought her out. She walked barefoot across cold metal, ankles locked by a pulse shackle. Her synthetic skin, once gleaming pearl, was dust-smudged and bruised with plasma scarring. Long silver hair was tangled and matted behind her shoulders, and thin orange prison cloth clung to her like paper. Her wrists were locked tight behind her, circuitry flickering blue beneath her collarbone. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Asset number 77VK, defective hybrid, half price. 50% off, no tracking, no recall code, no questions asked." Laughter rippled across the yard. Someone coughed and said, "Must be cursed if they're giving her away." The clone girl, Vela, didn't speak, didn't beg, didn't even look at the crowd. Her eyes were dull silver, flat like a powered-down console. Not empty, just quiet. Men shifted. A bounty hunter leaned on his rifle. A miner elbowed his friend. "Only a fool would touch that." "Or someone desperate," the other whispered. Near the back, leaning against a crate of starship plating, stood Joran Thane, a lone mechanic from Earth. Dust on his boots, scar along his jaw. He hadn't come to bid. He came for coolant cables and a second-hand solar converter. That was all. But the moment he saw her stumble, the way her knees buckled but she forced herself upright, something in his chest moved. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. He'd seen that same stare in fellow soldiers during the last Ring War. When they'd been left behind, stripped of armor, told they weren't strategic assets anymore. The auctioneer barked louder. 50% off, boys! She's yours. No tracking, no oversight." Still no one raised a hand. The crowd started turning away. The girl stood in silence, chest rising and falling fast, still trying to cover herself even though her arms were bound. Joran felt heat rise under his collar. Something old, something quiet and human and furious. Then, slow, deliberate. He raised his hand. The auctioneer froze. So did half the crowd. One man near the front laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right? A human bidding on a clone slave?" Joran said nothing. He stepped forward, unhooked a coin cred from his belt, and dropped it into the receiver box with a clang. "Confirmed," the terminal blinked. "Purchase recorded." The auctioneer shrugged, grinning greasy. "She's yours now, friend." No returns. Joran didn't answer. He walked straight up to her, pulled a blade from his utility belt, sliced the shackle free from her wrists. It sparked, fizzed, then dropped. She collapsed instantly. Joran caught her mid-fall, arms steady, careful not to grip too tight. She didn't resist, didn't speak. She just sagged against his chest, breathing shallow. No fight left in her, only silence. He didn't say a word as he carried her past the onlookers, through the rusted gates, and out toward his old star hauler waiting in Dock 7. The wind blew sharp between the towers. She shivered once, reflex, not fear, and kept her eyes closed. Even then, her fingers gripped the edge of his jacket, still trying to keep herself covered. That small act hit harder than any scream. Inside the ship, the hauler wasn't much. A single-deck transport retrofitted for solitude. Battered hull, patched wiring, one cot bolted beside the old reactor heater. But it was quiet, and it was his. Joran laid her gently on the bunk, pulled a clean cloth from the wall locker, draped it over her frame without looking directly, then sat beside the control panel, arms crossed, watching the readouts. No signal beacons, no bounty alerts, no trackers. Good. Behind him, she stirred, sat up slowly, weak, cautious, eyes scanning the room like a hunted animal. Joran didn't move, just slid a cup of water toward her across the side table. "You drink first," he said. She hesitated, then drank, too fast, and coughed. He looked away, pretending not to notice. She pulled the cloth tighter across her body. She still hadn't spoken. Minutes passed. The ship hummed softly. "I'm Joran," he said. "You don't have to tell me your name unless you want to." Her voice, when it came, was hoarse, processed. "Vela," he nodded once. "You're safe here." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a brief second her eyes didn't look dull. They looked alive, suspicious. "Why take me?" she asked. Joran didn't dress it up. "Didn't want to leave you there." Men don't take without reason. He met her eyes steady. "I don't want anything from you." She stared longer. Then, slow as breath, she relaxed her shoulders by an inch. Not trust, not even belief. But she heard him, and that mattered. Hours later, she wore one of his spare tech shirts now. It hung oversized off her frame, sleeves rolled up. Her feet were still bare, but warmer now. She sat curled up near the heater coil, arms wrapped around her knees. Joran worked at the console, rerouting power to the docking array. Not checking on her, just being near without pressing. "Do they come back?" she asked suddenly. "The ones who sold me?" Joran shook his head. "Not likely. Once they get paid, they forget." She looked away, silent. Then, "I stay, for now." He nodded once, not as an owner, as a host. "Door stays unlocked. You can leave when you choose." She looked at his hands. Rough, calloused, not reaching. Just working. And for the first time, she didn't sit with her back to the wall. She sat sideways, watching the stars blink beyond the window. The ship drifted in low orbit around Ganira 6's moon, its solar panels barely catching the dying light from the system's twin suns. No alerts, no incoming scans, just emptiness. Inside, it smelled like rust, metal polish, and old heat. Vela sat with her back to the thermal unit, Joran's oversized shirt wrapped tight around her knees. The pulse collar marks on her throat still glowed faintly under her skin. Reminders of ownership that hadn't fully faded. But now she wasn't curled in the corner like yesterday. She sat centered, watching the sparks flutter off Joran's welding tool as he reattached the coolant coupler. She said nothing, but she didn't look away. Joran glanced at her without speaking, then kept working. Later, he left a plate near her. Rehydrated stew, nutrient bars, and water. He didn't sit close. Just returned to the nav console and resumed diagnostics. She waited 5 minutes, then moved, picked up the fork, ate slow, careful, like someone used to earning every bite. She didn't say thanks. He didn't ask for it. That night, she didn't sleep in the corner. She returned to the cot, sat on its edge, staring at her own hands like they didn't belong to her. "You were a soldier," she said suddenly. He didn't answer at first. Then, "Not anymore." "You move like one." Joran set down the coil wrench, stood, walked to the tool locker, opened it, not hiding it from her, and pulled out a blanket. "Ship's cold at night," he said. "Take it." She didn't move to grab it, just stared. No collars, no cuffs, and no orders. That line hung heavy in the room. She took the blanket, sat back down. Silence again, but this time softer. 3 days later, she was standing, on her own, still barefoot, still wrapped in his shirt, but standing, watching the viewport as Ganira 6 spun slowly below. The world glowed blue and gold, thick with ridges and canyons, surrounded by satellite rings like broken halos. Joran watched from the other side of the room, wiping oil from his hands. "You ever been planetside? Not without chains?" That answer didn't come bitter, just honest. He tapped the screen. "There's a canyon settlement down there. Unlicensed zone. No scans, no cameras, traders pass through." She turned, her expression unreadable. "Why tell me?" "Because you're not stuck here. Not unless you choose to be. You'd let me walk away. I didn't pull you off that auction to own you." She stared at him for a long time, the kind of stare that came from not being believed for a long time. Then quietly, "Most men take." Joran nodded once. "I'm not most men. Routine begins." She started watching how he worked, how he stripped wires, balanced the power cells, rerouted coolant lines. She never asked questions, but she watched everything. And the next day, without asking, She picked up the backup coil and handed it to him mid-repair. "Wrong one," he said gently. She didn't flinch, just put it back and picked the right one. He smiled, barely, but she caught it. Later that night, she sat by the heat coil again, hands in her lap, legs pulled up. But this time she spoke first. "The ones who made me, they said I was a mistake. Too emotional, too hard to program. Is that why they sold you? They couldn't delete what they called instinct. I call that humanity." She tilted her head. "I'm not human." He leaned back in the chair, hands behind his head. "You were the only one at that auction who stood upright. You didn't cry, didn't scream, just stood your ground. That's more human than most of the bastards I've fought beside." She didn't respond, but her hands, always tense, always clenched, loosened. She rested them on her knees, palms open, a quiet kind of permission. He gave her space. She gave him time. By the end of the first week, she moved around the hauler freely. She learned which panels sparked, which wires were safe. She started brushing her hair again, slowly, like she remembered it used to mean something. And every night she returned to the cot, not because she was told to, but because it was hers now. A space where no one reached in the dark, where no one watched with hunger, where her silence didn't cost her dignity. Joran knew she was healing. Not from anything she said, but from what she stopped doing. She stopped flinching when the reactor clicked. She stopped watching the door like someone might burst through. She started waking up slower, not jolted by nightmares, but drifting into consciousness like it was allowed. One night she stood behind him while he cooked. "You have enemies?" He didn't turn. "Had some. Not many left. You left your world. Didn't feel like mine anymore." "And me?" she asked. "Do I belong here?" Joran turned then, met her eyes. "That's for you to decide." She stepped closer, not too close, just enough. "Then I stay for now." Not like an offer, like a decision. Outside the ship, a pulse beacon flickered briefly. Unclaimed cargo ID, tagged. But Joran didn't know that yet. He only knew that the girl in his ship had stopped being a rescued clone. She was just Vela now, and he was just a man doing what others wouldn't, not saving her, but letting her save herself. The cabin lights flickered once, barely noticeable, but Joran caught it. He was midway through syncing the reactor logs when the flicker happened again. Slower this time, rhythmic, not random. "System tap," he muttered. A hardwired echo like someone had pinged the ship from just beyond local scan range. Careful not to trip alarms. Joran shut the console off and stood, quiet, controlled. Across the room, Vela looked up from where she sat cross-legged, soldering a cracked comm board he let her practice with. "Something's wrong?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He just walked to the side panel, opened the maintenance bay, and tapped into the long-range relay logs. A red pulse blinked once, then vanished. Untraceable now, but it had come from orbit. "Was it a recall beacon?" she asked again, standing slowly, her voice steadier than it used to be, but her fingers were shaking. Joran exhaled through his nose, jaw tight. "Could be a bounty drone. Could be nothing." "But you don't believe that," she said. He turned to face her. The old fear was back in her eyes, not paralyzing, just coiled. Ready, like she expected to be dragged again. "We stayed dark," he said, "no transmissions. Reactor stays cold. You and me, we bunker down until we know. And if they come, then we make it not worth their trouble." They sealed the doors, dimmed the lights. Vela didn't ask for details. She knew how this worked. You didn't survive in labs and auction blocks without learning what kind of silence kept you alive. She moved around the ship like she belonged now, checking hatch locks, shielding leftover wiring, stashing the food capsules in thermal sleeves to keep heat signatures low. When she passed Joran, he handed her a plasma cutter. "You've seen how I hold it," he said. "I've seen," she replied, and held it right. The waiting began. That night, they didn't speak much. The stars outside spun slow, cold, indifferent. Inside, the heater buzzed faintly, casting a soft glow against the curved walls. Joran sat at the edge of the cot, tuning a pressure valve by hand. Vela stood barefoot, arms wrapped around her own waist. "You think they know I'm here?" she asked. "Doesn't matter if they do," he said. "You're not property anymore. They won't care." "Then I'll remind them." She stared at him. For the first time, her voice shook a little. "Why risk yourself for me?" He didn't look up, just twisted the valve one last time before saying, "Because someone should have done it sooner." The signal returned mid-cycle, 2 short bursts, then silence, like a sonar ping daring him to respond. Joran didn't, but he reloaded the coil rifle, set it by the door. When he returned to the main deck, he found Vela curled near the heater. Not asleep, just quiet, watching shadows dance on the floor. She looked up. "If they breach, they won't. But if they do, then we fight, side by side." She hesitated. "You trust me with that?" He nodded once, no hesitation. "You don't break easy, Vela." She looked away. "They said I felt too much, that I failed my purpose. Then their purpose was the problem. Not you." She stared at him for a long time, and something unspoken passed between them. Not gratitude, not awe, just the recognition of someone who had never heard those words spoken without an angle behind them. They didn't sleep that night, not fully, but not out of fear either. Joran sat upright with the rifle across his lap. Vela stayed close enough to the heater to stay warm, but her back wasn't against the wall this time. She trusted the room. She trusted him. In the early cycle light, before the stars fully turned, she whispered, "I had a name once before the asset tag. Do you remember it?" "Only how it felt. Like light through glass. I want to choose one of my own someday." He smiled faintly. "Then wait for the moment that feels real. You'll know midday. A ship appeared on scanners, not a law ship, not corporate, something older, rusted, non-aligned, a smuggler class with cloaking scars and solar-scorched wings. It parked in orbit, didn't ping, didn't hail, just watched. Joran knew what that meant. Not here to bargain, just here to see if it was safe to descend. "We prepped to move," he said. "Back to orbit?" she asked. "Too predictable. We land, disappear planetside, hide in plain sight." Vela stood still. "Last time I was on a planet, I was in chains. This time you'll walk free." She swallowed. "What if I freeze?" "Then I'll wait until you move." Like always, they moved together. Landing on the far side of Ganera 6, hidden between crystalline cliffs and sulfur winds. No towns, no scanners, just a buried power grid station from a mining era long gone. Joran hauled the emergency shelter from storage. Vela carried the coil packs. They worked side by side, wordless and fast. As they set up camp, she looked at him. "I don't feel hunted right now." "You're not. I want that feeling to last." "Then we make it last." That night, beside the low hum of buried energy lines, Joran stared into the firelight flickering against the shelter wall. Vela sat beside him, hands wrapped around a steaming cup. "You saved me," she said softly. He didn't turn to her. "No, I just didn't walk away." She watched him closely. "That's what saving looks like to me." The third night on Ganera 6 was colder. The wind howled low through the cliff cracks, and static dust danced across the outcrop where their shelter sat half dug into the canyon wall. Joran stood watch beside the slope, coil rifle slung across his shoulder. He hadn't seen movement for hours, but he felt it. The kind of silence that wasn't natural. A pause in the world before something breaks. Inside the shelter, Vela sat on a thermal mat, sharpening one of Joran's tools to a fine point. Her breath came steady, but she hadn't slept. Not really. She didn't ask if something was coming. She already knew. And when the first drone appeared, just a flicker of red light cresting the ridge, they were already ready. The ambush came swift. No sound, just one dark cloaked figure descending the slope, a magnetic blade strapped to his back, a slave catcher burned on his collar. Joran didn't wait for a warning. He fired first. The shot sparked against the scavenger's deflector, sending him tumbling back in a spin of dust and static. But more followed. 2, then 3. Not a full kill squad, just enough to take back stolen property. They didn't say her name. They called her asset. They called Joran interference. That was their first mistake. Vela didn't run. Joran barked for her to get to the back ridge, to retreat to the secondary hatch. But she didn't move. "I'm done running," she said. "Then shoot straight," he replied, tossing her the second rifle. Her grip was steady now. She didn't flinch as the heat built around the barrel. She didn't hesitate when the first scavenger dropped over the ledge, aiming for Joran's spine. One clean shot. She hit him center mass. His body slid down the slope like dead cargo. Joran looked over his shoulder. "Told you you don't break easy." "They should have deleted more of me," she said coldly. But they couldn't. The fight didn't last long. 3 down, 1 fled. Vela chased him to the edge of the power grid ruins, eyes glowing faint from overcharged adrenaline. But Joran called her back. "He's not worth it," he said. "He'll tell them where we are." "Let him. They won't find you again." She stopped, breathed heavy, and then slowly turned back. Not because she obeyed, because she chose to trust. Later, the quiet returned. The night stretched long. Neither of them spoke for a while. The fire cracked inside the shelter. The wind carried the scent of scorched metal. Vela sat beside him again, knees drawn to her chest, rifle still beside her. "I've never killed before," she said. "You didn't kill. You defended. What's the difference?" "Choice," Joran answered. "You weren't forced." She was quiet a long time, then whispered, "That's the difference, isn't it? That I got to choose." He looked at her and didn't see a defective clone or asset. He saw someone becoming, someone burning through fear like dawn burns frost. "I used to think I was made wrong," she said, "because I felt everything too much, because I hesitated, because I didn't obey fast enough." "You weren't made wrong," he said. "They were afraid of what they couldn't control." "And you?" she asked, eyes searching his face. "Are you afraid of me?" He leaned forward just a little. "No, I'm afraid of losing someone who deserved better than chains." They sat close after that, not touching, but no longer on opposite sides of the fire. Her shoulders brushed his. Once, then twice, she didn't pull away. A few hours before dawn, she stood slowly, walked to the back of the shelter. She picked up her old uniform, the orange collarless prison cloth. She held it in both hands, looked down, then threw it into the fire. Joran turned at the sound, watched in silence. The flames consumed it fast, hissed and curled as synthetic threads melted. She didn't cry, didn't flinch. She stood tall, bare feet planted, hands steady. Then she turned to him. "That wasn't armor. It was a leash. And the shirt you're wearing now?" he asked. She touched it lightly, the loose folds still hanging off her shoulders. "This is mine. Because you never asked me to wear it. You just left it nearby. You left the choice," Joran nodded once, "and I always will." Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her breath, close enough that she didn't tremble anymore. Her hand touched his arm. Light, uncertain, then steadier. "You didn't save me at that auction," she whispered. "You just didn't leave." He looked into her eyes, not glowing now, just tired, real, alive. "I don't want to be saved," she said. "I want to stand. On my own, but maybe not alone." He reached up, not fast, not greedy, and touched her hand gently. "Then stand here, with me." And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like something broken trying to heal. She felt like something strong beginning to rise. The storm passed by morning, not in thunder or wind, but in silence. No more scanners, no ships above, no red pings on the console, just stillness, cold and wide, the kind of quiet that came after something had broken or been rebuilt. Vela stood outside the shelter with a sun visor across her eyes, wind curling strands of her hair in the canyon light. She looked different now, still alien, still otherworldly, but her spine was straighter. Her shoulders no longer curled inward like armor. Her breath moved like it belonged in her chest. Behind her, Joran watched from the slope where he'd been repairing the ridge antenna, tools in one hand, coffee in the other. She turned when she heard his boots. "They won't come back," she said. He nodded. "Not unless they're stupid." She smiled slightly, the closest thing to softness he'd seen on her face. "I'm starting to understand this kind of quiet," she said. "It's not silence anymore. he replied. No, it's peace. You earned it. She didn't answer right away. Then, not just me. That afternoon, they sat beside the old hydro sink, splitting a pouch of dried ration bread and honey. Vela had rethreaded the cuffs of her new shirt, not the old orange uniform, not Joran's borrowed one. A new one she stitched herself from scrap cloth they traded last week. Each thread was uneven, each patch slightly off-center, but she wore it with pride. It's still not perfect, she said, tugging at the sleeve. Perfection is overrated, he answered. Function matters more. That's what they used to say when they tested us. He looked at her. But they meant obedience, strength. She sat closer that evening. Not out of cold, not fear, just choice. The fire crackled between them, low and warm. She held a cup in her hands, fingers now healed where the shackle once burned. Her voice was quiet when she said, "Do you still want to know what I was made for?" Joran didn't answer, didn't press, but she continued anyway. "I was bred to interpret battle data midfield, to read enemy pulses and predict moves. They thought a hybrid mind could do both, feel and obey. But I felt too much. Hesitated, chose wrong once. That was all it took. They said I was corrupted by conscience." Joran shook his head. "That's not corruption. That's soul." She looked at him, the fire lit her face orange and gold, making her eyes shine like dusk on still water. "You said something once," she whispered. "That I wasn't property. That I was free. I didn't believe you at first, I know. I do now." And then gently she reached for his hand, not rushed, not fearful, just calm. Her fingers rested against his knuckles, not clinging, not questioning, simply touching. "You waited," she said. "You never reached before I moved." "Choice has to lead," he said, "especially when someone's never had it before." She nodded, then leaned forward slightly. Her forehead touched his, a gesture small, wordless, human, no kiss, not yet, just breath shared. "I want this," she whispered. "Not because you gave it, because I choose it. That's all I ever wanted," he replied. Spring didn't exist on Ganera 6, but the air was warmer by the next cycle. The frost melted off the hydro tank. Bird-like creatures circled the distant cliffs, their calls sharp and echoing. And Vela, once a tagged asset, now stood in worn boots and a hand-stitched shirt, arms folded, eyes scanning the valley below. "There are more like me," she said, "out there. Ones who didn't get out." Joran nodded. "You want to find them?" "Someday." "Not yet. And if you go," he asked, keeping his voice low, steady, "you'll wait?" "No," he said. "I'll walk beside you." She looked at him again, this time not just with memory, with hope. That night they sat together near the heater. Vela wore the new jacket he'd modified for her own, a patch of red across the shoulder. Her design, her choice. Joran cleaned his tools. She traced the map across the valley wall with her eyes. "Do you still miss Earth?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, "but I think this feels more like home now." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Me too." They didn't need promises. No dramatic declarations. No speeches. Just two people who had been broken by others, now quietly mending in the same space. The fire flickered. The air hummed. And when their lips met, finally, bow, wasn't because the story demanded it. It was because they had reached that moment together, step by step. It wasn't a rescue, wasn't possession. It was belonging, earned slowly, freely. And when the stars rose over Ganera 6, the girl who had once been 50% off, unclaimed and forgotten, now stood wrapped in warmth beside the man who never tried to own her. Not slave, not soldier, not asset, just Vela. The world called her defective, but the human never tried to fix her. He just let her grow, and the name, the life, was hers, by choice.